MAGA Republican Senate candidate Kari Lake had a meltdown during an interview with a reporter at the Republican National Convention, which was so unhinged it was worthy of Marjorie Taylor Greene. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. I mentioned in a video yesterday that Marjorie Taylor Greene, also at the Republican National Convention, had a meltdown when she was pressed with perfectly reasonable questions by a British journalist. Kari Lake kind of went through the same. Now, I will say Kari Lake is more media savvy than Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's more poised. Her derangement is much calmer by comparison. And so this British reporter actually asked her tough questions. Still fair questions, but tough questions compared to the ones that Marjorie Taylor Greene got. And it wasn't long before Kari Lake started to spiral herself. We're going to play these clips and unpack them together.
Civility in politics, a kind of unity. What does that mean to you?
I actually think the tone has always been good. I believe that what we're trying to push is a strong economy, secure borders. These are policies everybody wants. And
you don't think the tone in American politics got out of hand?
I think the tone is really disturbing when the media is calling a man like Donald Trump Hitler.
Okay, well, perhaps he should stop acting like Hitler. I digress. But so you're going to see, the reason I'm laughing is because this British journalist is really good at what she does. There is a chronology. There is a narrative in the sense of to her questions. There's a logical sequence there. She's asking about tone and civility, and Kari Lake stupidly says, the tone's great, especially on our side. We're pushing policy. You know, Republicans, well known for being a policy-focused party. Then, of course, she starts to faceplant when Kari Lake's civility begins to unravel. Kari Lake starts to faceplant. Another clip.
And it's so irresponsible.
And you falsely claimed that Trump won in 2020. You called for the imprisonment of those who accepted Trump's defeat, including your own opponent in Arizona, Katie Hobbs. Why did you do that?
Called for the imprisonment of what?
Of opponents like Katie Hobbs who accepted Trump's defeat. Why did you falsely claim that Trump won in 2020?
Well, I'm not going to sit here and go through all of the evidence of what happened. Do you believe Joe Biden won 81 million votes? Do you think he's more popular? A guy who can't string two sentences together. You believe he's more popular than Barack Obama? I'm asking you, do you believe that he is the most popular president in the history?
She never claimed that. Nobody's claiming that. As a matter of fact, typically voter turnout does tend to increase year after year. More people tend to vote in the next presidential election than they did in the last. That doesn't necessarily mean that President Biden is more popular than President Obama. As a matter of fact, we know that that's not the case. Obama had much higher approval rating, much more consistently than President Biden. But that's also the same case for Donald Trump, right? And Donald Trump got the second greatest number of votes, presidential votes in U.S. history, right under Joe Biden in 2020. Do you think that that Donald Trump is more popular than Barack Obama, Kari? She probably does, of course, or at least would say he is. But there's no reason to believe that. It's a ridiculous question. Of course, what she's being asked about is her propensity as a MAGA Republican to not accept the outcomes of free and fair elections. But again, you're starting to see the unraveling, right? And the whataboutism and the deflection. It gets worse.
Lawfare.
And he said that you had turned his life upside down. He said you'd made him the target of threats of violence and death.
I'm in the middle of a lawsuit and I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to work. When you're in the middle of a lawsuit, you don't want to talk about it, okay? We talk about it in court. That's where we talk about it. I feel confident that I've spoken the truth. But you know what?
You made him the target of violence and death. You saw what happened on the stage on Saturday night. You heard Donald Trump say, let's lower the temperature. Do you accept the part you played in inflaming the political rhetoric in this country?
You are just part of the fake news and you're lying. You don't know a damn thing about Arizona. You don't know one thing about our election, and you sit there with a smirk on your face. You're sitting over in England, in the UK, in a country that's being destroyed. in a country that's being destroyed.
I guess I'm just asking.
And I really don't.
What it says about the
this is the
Republican
last
Party,
question.
that they need to lie, to intimidate,
question.
to threaten, because you don't believe you can win at the ballot box. Why would you need to do that?
You are just a sad case of a human being, and I'm so sorry for you. I'm sorry that you.
I mean, absolutely unhinged stuff. One more clip from that exchange. Again, you see it. I mean, she really, like most other MAGA Republicans, are much too similar to the snowflakes that they constantly accuse others of being to handle these perfectly fair questions.
I don't understand what's happening.
So I'm guessing if you don't win in November, you won't concede. That's the rule that you're playing by now, is it?
You are. I actually think you need your head examined.
Can you answer?
Ouch. I mean, listen, it's so funny. I love this. I really do. I do mean this. This is good. This is how journalists should be treating MAGA Republican politicians, by asking them questions, particularly about the fundamentals. Is it only possible that elections are free and fair when you win? I mean, my God, as disappointed as I was with the 2016 election, I didn't say that it was stolen. And what's ironic is we actually know that foreign adversaries like Russia were actively campaigning and intervening on Donald Trump's behalf because they wanted him to win the election. When President Bush won in 2004, right, that was not the preferred outcome. But there wasn't, mass movements from Democratic politicians to say that the election had been stolen from John Kerry, et cetera, and so forth. It's perfectly possible for Republicans to freely and fairly win elections, but Republicans don't believe that about Democrats, even though Democratic policies tend to be more popular, Democratic politicians tend to be more popular, and there are more people in the Democratic coalition than there are Republican, which is why Republicans haven't won the popular vote for president but one time in the past 30 years. But this is the environment that they've created for themselves heuristically. They just can't conceive, let alone concede, of a situation in which they freely, fairly lose an election. The entire movement is predicated that Donald Trump is a genius, that Donald Trump is a god, that Donald Trump is infallible. And if he fails or is defeated or suffers any sort of setback, it's because something cheated him out of it. He can never lose freely and fairly because it's a cult, which should be, as I've said before, relentlessly mocked and belittled. And I do stand by that. The notion, however, about cheating, right, which Kari Lake peddles, it was also peddled at the Republican National Convention the same day by Donald Trump Jr. This is how he answered a perfectly reasonable question about the possibility that Trump may lose.
Overconfident. If former President Trump loses, it will be why?
It'll be why? Well, I'd say cheating. I don't know. This is obviously.
Well said, Don. This is why I have such disrespect for Republican leaders, Republican politicians. I stand by it. I'm sorry. You cannot have, there's this great book, which I've mentioned before, called The Tyranny of the Minority by two Harvard political scientists and professors. And they point out that a functioning democratic republic can't function if one of the two major parties believes that they can't win free and fair elections and are therefore incentivized to not recognize free and fair elections. You actually have to have buy-in from as many constituents and political actors as possible in order for the society to continue to progress. Again, I've used the metaphor of almost like a three-legged race. You can't have a three-legged race if your partner just drops to the ground and hugs your leg, right? Or tries to move in the opposite direction. Can't function like that. And that is the Republican Party. They are the partner in the three-legged race, dropping to the ground and hugging our legs. How can we function that way? They have convinced themselves that they can't win the popular vote, that they can't win public widespread support, that they need to either create or exacerbate the many institutional advantages that they have, which enshrine minority rule. And then to top it all off, as if it wasn't bad enough, and as if the landscape wasn't already favorable towards them because of these institutional advantages, now the notion is, if they win elections, those elections are free and fair. If they lose elections, it's because the elections are not free and fair, and they don't have to worry about providing evidence. It's just you feel. It's like a gut feeling. It's a vibe. It's just a vibe, right? You don't need to prove vibes. It's ridiculous. I think it's good that these people are being called out. By the way, I don't even want to play the rest of this clip because it's really annoying. But the Axios reporter sitting by Don Jr. and asked him that question, doesn't actually push back on any of it. They just move on. That's the other problem. Even the mainstream media environment, which Axios is part of. I don't think Axios is like an ideologically right-wing organization the way the Newsmax is or OAN or Fox, but they grade these people on a curve. They grade the Republicans on a curve. Imagine the endless array of Axios op-eds and stories. If a Democrat, or if that had been, because Don Jr. isn't even a Republican politician. He's just Donald Trump's son. Imagine if for whatever reason Hunter Biden was at the Democratic National Convention and he had a microphone and a chair and somebody asked him that, hey, what if your dad loses? Well, it's because the Republicans cheated. That would get nonstop wall-to-wall coverage on Axios, the New York Times, CNN, Reuters, the Associated Press, whatever. And there would be a lot of pushback, by the way, from journalists. But because it's a Republican, it's like, they believe that stuff. It's kind of crazy. Let's move on. It's ridiculous. But good to see Kari Lake also suffered a Marjorie Taylor Greene-tier nuclear meltdown. It's always fun to see. Let me know what you think in the comments.